Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend a hearty welcome to everyone who has joined us for this 21st session of the Agri-Food Business Series hosted by IICA and COLEAD. Today's session is going to be an exciting one. It's titled Advancing Agroecology for Caribbean Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. And I should insert somewhere in between there, micro. So micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. My name is Allister Glean. I am the representative in Barbados for the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. And I'm excited and I'm really happy to be part of this session. I want to take the opportunity to indicate that IICA and COLEAD have enjoyed this wonderful partnership since 2021. This was an initiative spearheaded by my predecessor, Mrs. Ina Harvey, and Ms. Isolina Boto, formerly of COLEAD. And they came up with this wonderful idea to engage in a collaboration that would allow us to advance agribusinesses in the Caribbean. And we've been so fortunate to benefit from participation from colleagues in the Pacific, in Africa, as well as Europe. We at IICA are really pleased for this partnership with COLEAD. On the other side, I have my colleagues, Ines, Bastos, we have Nina Desanlis, who you'll see and hear from shortly, and my colleague, Agroecology. So we are really excited to be part of this initiative today in particular, as we talk about agroecology. Before I go into that specific topic, and I'll be honest, I'm not a great expert, so this is going to be a learning experience for me as well. I want to say a little bit more about the IICA-COLEAD partnership. As I said, we've started this activity since 2021, but we are seeking to expand the partnership. And now what we're seeing is IICA and COLEAD collaborating on various initiatives at the annual Caribbean Week of Agriculture. I'll make a plug for that. This year it's going to be hosted in Montego Bay, Jamaica, and it's going to be held the first week of October 2026. And IICA and COLEAD have been working together on initiatives with respect to digital solutions and digital agriculture generally. We've been collaborating on issues related to agricultural health and food safety. We've been working together on advancing the bioeconomy. And in fact, on July 8th, we're going to have a webinar looking at the bioeconomy targeted at Latin America and the Caribbean. So a lot of exciting things are coming. Now, I want to say that this issue of agroecology is important for us. It's been a hot topic. I know that a number of entrepreneurs have been asked us to address the topic, and we're really committed to supporting the development of agribusinesses in the region. In fact, at IICA, my colleagues in the climate change program, in particular, we have a Caribbean Climate Responsive Agriculture Forum that really drives this particular agenda. And they were very supportive in this particular activity today. Now, we know for the region, food security is critical. And the agri-food systems contribute a lot to overall economy, so enhancing rural livelihoods, etc. And in fact, yesterday I was at a agri-food systems investment forum held here in Barbados, and it was coordinated rather by the United Nations agencies here. And they address some of the very same issues we want to put on the table here. And we know that agri-food systems, despite being so important and so critical to our development, they face so many pressures, whether it's related to predial larceny, high cost of inputs, pest and disease issues, and particularly, we love to talk nowadays about the various climate risks that we face. And agroecology, the use of ecological principles to advance agri-food systems, looking at diversification and biological processes to provide nutrients, etc., to the food systems, are becoming so more important for our producers. When we embrace agroecology and the traditional knowledge by the farmers and marry it with the scientific knowledge, it can really allow us to have more sustainability and competitiveness in our food systems. So it's something that we want to look at. And we tend to do it already. A lot of us do it, but we need more bridging of the gap, as I said, between the scientific knowledge and the traditional knowledge that the farmers that they possess. So we want to see more multi-cropping. We want to see more soil conservation. We want to see more recycling. And for me, my bias is towards agro-processing and value-added, but there's a role there as well. And for value-added players, let's be realistic. Agroecological linkages with respect to agro-processing, it creates a overall integrated value chain that pushes more resources towards efficient practices and ensures that we're a bit more resilient. We look at more issues related to fairness and connectivity and community. And that's what we want as processors. We want sustainable businesses as well. So this focus on agroecology is important for even the processors and the value-added players today. So I think I've been rambling enough already. That is my brief introduction. I want to get this show on the road. This, as I said, is going to be a phenomenal session today. We look forward to persons coming on. We look forward to the questions. And we have a cadre of dynamic presenters on today. Before I introduce the first panel, though, I want to introduce my colleague from COLEAD, who's going to deliver a few remarks. And I'm speaking about Ms. Ines Bastos, and she's the head of networks and alliances at COLEAD. Let me tell you a bit about Ines. Ines is the head of networks, as I said, and alliances. She brings over 2 decades of expertise across technical assistance, monitoring, network management, and policy development, with a deep specialization in agri-food sector development. Now, since coming on to COLEAD, Ines has also led and coordinated technical activities across sub-Saharan Africa, overseeing programs and projects spanning agri-food production and processing, business management, access to finance, and network development. In 2024, though, she took on the role of COLEAD's gender lead, driving women in agriculture, driving them towards more empowerment across the organization's programs. So she has been driving for and pushing for women to be more involved in agriculture, and that's what she's driving at COLEAD. And now she is the head of networks and alliances. Without further ado, I pass to Ines to deliver a few remarks on behalf of COLEAD. Ines?
Thank you so much, Allister. Thank you so much. So, good afternoon to everyone. Buenos dias, bonjour, boa tarde, and a warm welcome to all participants joining us today from across the Caribbean and beyond. I see already from the chat that we have participants also from the African continent and Europe. So it's really a pleasure to open this session together with our really trusted partner, IICA. So a special thank you to you, Allister, IICA representative, and also the IICA members that are here today. I think I'm quite new at networks and alliances. So as you mentioned, I've been working in technical assistance, and I'm the new head of networks and alliances since April. So quite new for me, and it's great to see this partnership that started, as you mentioned, with my predecessor, Isolina Botho, and so. We both share a common conviction at IICA and COLEAD that the Caribbean agri-food sector has really an extraordinary potential, and that unlocking it requires connecting people, knowledge, and markets in a sustained and structured way. So over the past years, our partnership has grown into something we are genuinely proud of. So this is the 21st session, so a series of sessions that has brought together thousands of participants, entrepreneurs, experts, and institutions from across the Caribbean, Europe, Latin America. Allister mentioned this further collaboration with LATAM, so Latin America, Africa, Europe, beyond. So today marks our 21st joint session, so it's really a long journey. And today's topic, agroecology, sits at the heart of what COLEAD and IICA have been building together, connecting entrepreneurs, experts, and knowledge across the region to support more resilient and sustainable agri-food systems. This is a topic that matters deeply for Caribbean SMEs, not as an abstract concept, but as a practical, context-specific pathway to reduce dependence on costly internal and external inputs, strengthen resilience to climate shocks, and access markets that are increasingly value responsible production. So this 21st session is bringing together two perspectives. On one hand, we have the experience of Caribbean farmers and entrepreneurs, and this will be the first panel of the session. And then we have on the second panel, the scientific and technical knowledge of experts in the field. So it's also great to welcome my colleague Pieterjan that is part of the second panel and is bringing this nuanced agroecology. So really stay tuned for the whole session. So I really hope this session sparks connections, ideas, and concrete takeaways for everyone in this webinar. I take this opportunity to just create an awareness that we have live interpretation in 4 languages. So if you see the globe on the bottom, you have the possibility to select in English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. So please select the right channel so that you can hear all the different speakers. I wish you all a great and rich program ahead, and thank you so much for being here today. And now I give the floor to our session moderator and partner, Allister. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ines. Wonderful introduction. Before I go on to speak on our first panel, and Ines said earlier, our first panel looks at experiences from Caribbean SMEs. Again, I'll put in the M, the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in agroecological practices. We want to have that sharing of experiences. We want to hear about the success stories, what is working, what's not working, because ultimately, that is what's going to drive us, information sharing. And producers need other things, the financing, the knowledge, the policy, the overall collaboration and community. And that's what we're going to hear in the second session. But before I go on to introduce our panelists, let me just do a bit of housekeeping. Each panel will comprise 3 presenters. Each presenter will have 10 minutes maximum to deliver their presentation. We'll just give them a little nudge if they're going over, but we really want to capture as much information that we can share with you, the audience. So each panelist is going to have 10 minutes. And after that, we're going to move on to the second panel. And following the second panel, we're going to have a Q&A session. What we ask you to do is to place your questions, your comments, your queries in the chat. We will collate them as we normally do, and then we'll present them to both panels at the end of the webinar. So I want to invite you, please put your comments, place your questions in the chat, and we will ensure that we get them answered. Without further ado, I think I will pass on to the first panel and introduce my first speaker. And my first speaker hails from the Helen of the West, from St. Lucia. And I'm speaking about Anja Fernand. And Anja is the founder and director of Food Harmony Incorporated, St. Lucia. Anja, I hope I got it correct, is a St. Lucian food systems entrepreneur. She is involved with regenerative agriculture, and she's the founder of Food Harmony Incorporated. Now, Anja was raised on a tropical food farm, and descended from generations of farmers. She earned a first-class honors BSc in food science from the University of Leeds and gained industry experience in product food development with Pennine Foods in England. After returning to St. Lucia in 2012, she combined her expertise in food science, ecotourism, and local food innovation to create value-added products from tropical crops. And Anja is a cancer survivor whose personal health transformation inspired a deeper exploration of food and wellness. And she founded Food Harmony to advance regenerative agriculture, clean food production, and agritourism. Now, since establishing her first organic farm in 2018, she has developed a multi-strata agroforestry research farm with more than 20 crop varieties and is actually expanding her farmer education platform through a second farm. Now, she's passionate about restoring soil health as the foundation of human health and building more resilient food systems for tropical communities. We have a real guru with us this morning. Anja, please, your 10 minutes starts from now. Thank you.
Thanks, Allister. Hello, everyone, and thank you for a wonderful introduction. I am so excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity to share my agroecological journey. So let's dive in. Next slide, please. I grew up on a fruit farm in St. Lucia. It was the beginning of my love for farming, food, and the great outdoors. Since then, I have had my share of health challenges, notably cancer as a young adult and 20 years struggling with obesity, beginning in childhood. Although I have made strides towards a healthier way of living, these life experiences still fuel my why, ongoing transformations for holistic health. But in the early years after surviving cancer, while I operated farm tours, I had heightened awareness, and so I was observing everything about farming in a new light. I observed patterns and gaps in the food and agricultural industry, including a considerable amount of chemical use, while soil health seemed to be declining. My agroecology journey started in 2018 when I had had enough. I had access to land, and so I jumped into organic agriculture, feet first, blind, and without tools. Not recommended. One way or another, I was going to figure out another way, a better way to farm or die trying. I was learning and building at the same time, which created unnecessary challenges. But that's where I was, and that was my start. At the root of it all, I wanted to change how we farm and how we eat in the tropics. So what did I do? I selected an old banana field, which is pictured here, that had been fallow for over a decade. I cleared the vines and shrubs off the land. I left wild growing guava and coconut trees for initial shade. Some land was so degraded, not even grass would grow for the next 2 to 3 years. There would be absolutely no chemical use on my farm. I planted cocoa in mostly pure stand, except for the wild guava and coconut. Water was trucked to keep young plants alive at first, and as there was no water source for irrigation. And after establishing that, I was still not satisfied with the results. Things were really struggling. And then I came across regenerative agriculture in the form of an online course. It was a life raft that led me to Gabe Brown's work and book, Dirt to Soil, as well as work of Didi Perhouse. Check out her flour and bread experiment on YouTube. It's absolutely amazing to see. I was re-energized at that point. I transitioned the cocoa field to a regenerative model farm. I studied the 5 regenerative agriculture principles and practices used in North America and adapted them to create practices that work for us in the tropics. Next slide, please. So this is what I did next. The first principle, minimal disturbance, meant no tilling and no chemicals. That was fine with me. I had already been doing that. If you are heavily dependent on chemicals, there is a process to withdraw them gradually. Instead of chemicals, I started recycling organic material, manure, leaves, grass clippings, pruned branches, and compost. Next, the trees in the grass cover served as active roots, covering a second principles. You want an abundance of living roots in your soil, and it helps to have roots that grow to a range of depths. So I adapted a multi-strata agroforest design, which also introduced the third principle of regenerative agriculture, biodiversity. By intercropping, I now have over 20 different plant varieties, some to generate revenue, some for personal consumption. The farmer must eat too. I have tropical fruit trees, a few forest trees, herbs, tree nuts, pineapples, pumpkin, and vanilla. They also help to create a microclimate that helps support water conservation. The fourth principle is soil armor. Grass and cover crops like pumpkin are all great for shielding the soil from wind and rain. Another great helper is grass clippings. When you cut grass with a weed whacker or cutlass and let it fall where it is cut, it creates a carpet-like layer which shields the soil from erosion and also helps with conservation of water. The final principle, animal integration. I have had cows and I want smaller ruminants in the future. But in the interim, I mimic this by cutting the grass to mimic grazing and manually spreading manure. Over the years, I have observed as the degraded soil is continuing to regenerate to a point where it is so productive. Regenerative agriculture practices rehabilitate soil health, catering to the soil and the microorganisms within it. I can see that the soil has become more aggregated, meaning that it is held together in nice clumps. There is better percolation as a result when it rains, and trees are producing better yields and larger fruits. Healthy soil is like a sponge that helps support food production in the unpredictable weather patterns that accompany climate change. It is estimated that by applying 1% of organic matter to your fields will increase the water holding capacity of soil by as much as 28,000 gallons per acre. I have no irrigation on the first farm, and I no longer truck water. I haven't since the second year of production. By focusing on soil health, plants have access to water when there is no rain, as this water is stored within the soil, and they are therefore more resilient during extended dry seasons. The water held in the soil is replenished faster when the rainy season resumes because the soil structure has already been built up. Therefore, recuperation of crops is expedited because the water goes into the soil rather than running off. The added benefit of soil health is that from improved percolation, healthy soils serve as a filtration system for water returning to aquifers. Let me say that again. The added benefit being that with improved percolation, healthy soils serve as filtration systems for water returning to aquifers, rather than water rushing over the ground to rivers and other waterways, taking along topsoil and other matter. So if there are chemicals, the soil filters them out, rather than them returning in concentrated forms to our water supply. Investing in soil health turns dirt to soil, a more prolific medium from which food production can be sustained. Regeneration must come before sustainability. We must restore soils to good health, not just sustain them where they are. Next slide, please. The transition improved business for me. Zero spend on chemicals, more food is grown per square foot because of the designs employed. If my circumstances were different, I would have done more cash crops in the earlier days to help with cash flow even further, as I mostly focused on tree crops and they take about 5 years to come into full production. Biodiversity helps limit spread of pest and disease, which then reduces your cost for maintenance. Active roots to different depths help to make more minerals accessible to plants with shallower growing roots. Healthier soils are more resilient to climate change, and biodiversity makes the farmer more resilient to market changes or crop loss. Basically, if one crop fails because of your biodiversity, you have multiple sources of revenue, so the loss is not as significant. All in all, better products reach markets while taking care of the land. Next slide, please. So in my opinion, when you invest in agroecology, there are many benefits, but the initial days may be quite challenging. In the beginning, yields are lower. There's a lot more labor required than conventional farming. However, with time, you find that your land is more resilient and productive. We need to look beyond the financial bottom line to the real cost, health of people and the planet, the health of the farmer, the consumer, the soil, the water systems, the whole picture. The sooner you start, the better. It was hard, and I did so imperfectly, but as the climate conditions worsen, I am so grateful every time I take a break in the shade of one of the trees I planted 7 or 8 years ago, or watch my plants recuperate quickly from an extended dry period. It may be more labor intensive, but it benefits smallholder farmers who are able to cultivate more on the smaller plots that they typically have because of the designs implemented. The limited agricultural land, especially in small island developing states like St. Lucia, must be protected and nurtured. It is also a great time to review financial structures and the vehicles of knowledge sharing. Next slide, please.
You have one more minute, Anja. Okay.
My advice is to start where you are and leverage what you already have. Create a formula that works for your resources and circumstances and manage it well. The Caribbean and all tropical countries have everything needed to lead in agroecology. I am still hopeful that we can regenerate our soils. I'll leave you all with this quote whose author is unknown. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. It reminds us to take action today, even small, consistent steps towards regenerating our soil and contributing to holistic health. Thank you for your attention. I welcome you to scan the QR code and connect with me.
Anja, I want to thank you for that awesome presentation. I feel so guilty pausing you. I found that so astonishing and interesting. And I like the fact that your personal history really would have led you on this journey. And it gave me an education lesson in terms of the value of agroecology, your cutting costs on inputs, and overall in looking at enhancing productivity on the farm, resilience building of the ecosystems, the soil health focus. I like that. And I like particularly as a marketer, how ultimately, as you said, better products to market. You're able to differentiate your product offering and put better quality products on the market. And something that stood out to me, the whole relationship between using organic matter in the soil and how it helps with water retention. I may have to contact you to get more information on that. And I can imagine the other questions we're going to have in the chat as we go forward. So, Anja, I want to thank you for that delivery and for sticking to time as well. So we want to move on though.
Thank you.
And I'll come back home to Barbados and welcome Rashonda Stuart, who is a tour guide, and she is associated with Coco Hill Forest here in the lovely island of Barbados. Rashonda is a Barbadian agroecologist, tour guide, and community practitioner, and she's dedicated to advancing regenerative agriculture and food sovereignty across the region. She's currently completing degrees in ecology at the University of West Indies and agriculture at Delaware State University. She has further strengthened her expertise through training in permaculture design, beekeeping, and blue economy management. So she's well-rounded and she's multi-purpose. I just want to say that. And for the past 3 years, Rashonda has worked at Coco Hill Forest in Barbados. Coco Hill Forest is a 66-acre agroforestry and agrotourism facility. And where at that facility, she applies syntropic farming, food forest development, composting, intercropping, and permaculture principles to support soil regeneration and biodiversity. Now, as a tour guide and volunteer coordinator, she helps connect visitors directly to regenerative land practices. Rashonda is also actively involved in Barbados's regenerative agriculture movement through initiatives such as Wired at Walker's Reserve, and she can tell you a bit more on that, and the Journey to 1,000 Acres Regenerative Agriculture Project. Now, she's passionate about creating resilient food systems. She's also committed to demonstrating that agroecology can provide both ecological and economic opportunities for Caribbean small island development states. I take this opportunity to welcome Rashonda to deliver her presentation.
Thank you, Allister. Good morning, everyone. And before I start, I'd like to thank COLEAD and IICA for organizing this session and for including Coco Hill Forest in this conversation. One I know for sure is going to mushroom into real change. My name, like Allister said, is Rashonda Stuart. I'm a tour guide and a budding agroecologist at Coco Hill Forest. So this is a 66-acre regenerative agroforest in Barbados. And here we are bridging food sovereignty, ecological restoration, and sustainable tourism. So for the last 12 years, we've been testing how regenerative methodologies work to regenerate a once degraded landscape into a self-sustaining, resilient food forest, and hopefully a model that the wider island can replicate. Now, quickly, I will run through where that model came from, how it works, and why it matters beyond Barbados. Next slide. So to understand why we farm this way, you do have to understand where we've come from. So coral limestone accounts for 85% of Barbados's geological makeup. The other 15%, the Scotland district where Coco Hill is located, is made up of sandstones, siltstones, and erodible clay soils, making it quite notorious for land slippage. Pairing that with centuries of colonial era sugarcane monoculture that stripped about 90% of the tree cover and heavy rainfalls, and the result is infertile topsoil being washed straight into the ocean. So this image here is quite a daunting aerial view of Barbados as of 2026. And I believe most of you would agree with me that this is land degradation at quite a vulnerable level. So going deeper into the ecological story, deforestation and introduced non-native species like the green vervet monkeys, we'll talk about that in a bit, have completely disrupted the native species balance. What that means is that the island's biodiversity is now greatly reduced, and unfortunately, what replaced it is a fragile, dependent, and unstable ecosystem. And as I always say, he who feeds you controls you. So when you have land that can't produce, unfortunately, we are forced to import. Barbados's food import bill is currently $325 million a year, which approximates to 90% of everything consumed domestically. That is food sovereignty crisis. That is a food sovereignty crisis. Next slide. So what are we doing about it? Well, at Coco Hill Forest, we're planning, designing, and executing using 4 pillars, where each one feeds into the next in a continuous regenerative cycle. Observe the land, design the system, plant crops, harvest, and return. So macro permaculture is where design along the natural contours of land slows down rainfall, and this helps it to spread across the hillsides and sink into the water table. Microsyntropy is what and how we plant. So cacao, coconut, banana, ginger, and vetiver grass are all planted together as their root systems interact with each other and bind to clay to lock it in soil, which eventually stabilizes the food forest from the ground up. Agrotourism is how we share the work and fund it through hiking, camping, workshops, etc. Ecological regeneration drives the visitor experience, and the visitor experience funds ecological regeneration. And finally, tertiary production closes the economic loop. So we process what we grow into value-added products like specialty rum, as you see here, chocolates, and jams for export revenue. So that's observe, design, plant, harvest, and return. Next slide. So continuing on the point of execution, our 4 core principles guide everything we do, which would be soil regeneration, reforestation, and biodiversity, food sovereignty, and basically reversing the damage that was done by colonial era sugar plantation monoculture. So we build soil using cut and drop composting, which is pictured in the first picture, and also in place mulching. We terrace and incorporate multi-layer farming to work with the hillside gradients. We've installed French drainage systems to manage water flow. We've preserved an untouched patch of old forest, and we've also completely eliminated chemical pesticides. Finally, we also maintain a botanical repository with over 70 species of trees and plants, featuring one of the island's first coconut nurseries. Next slide. However, though, over time, we have noticed a few things. Now, the top 2 photos are of the same site, one in 2014 and the other in 2026. So in the 2006 photo, that rich soil that dark rich soil that you're seeing is the result of years of intentional regeneration. We get a more manageable soil type. We get more biodiversity. We get a lot more of the microbial ecosystems, including earthworms. So now that biodiversity is our primary pest control, eliminating our reliance on chemical pesticides. As the system regulates itself, resilience builds. So while the landscape around us took damage, in 2021, we were mostly unaffected by Hurricane Elsa, and again in 2024 with Hurricane Beryl. Next slide. Although I have to be honest with you guys, a lot of work has been put in, and we are extremely glad to be seeing the results, but it's not been an easy journey. We do face real ongoing challenges across 4 main areas. So environmentally, intensifying drought, erratic rainfall, rising temperatures, and the invasive green vervet monkey population that I mentioned before. Unfortunately, it is steadily increasing, and it is a real issue considering how disruptive they are to the land as well as the ecological balance. Unfortunately, we have caught a few of them in the forest actually eating the birds' eggs as well as the chicks. So that does cause a huge, even another problem. Economically, transition costs are high, and import competition makes it hard to price local food fairly. Structurally, policy frameworks that still favor conventional agriculture and limited extension services for regenerative methods. And socially, the loss of traditional knowledge, a wider agricultural network, and a change of mindset is needed to create that shift. So Coco Hill is definitely not a finished case, but it is proof of concept and an honest account of what it takes, because this is a generational model. Considering how long it took for the land to get to this point, it is going to take considerable amount of time and consistent effort to heal it, as well as our relationship with the ecosystem. Next slide. So, as I conclude, the future of local and regional food systems depends on scaling this model. In Caribbean, we do have everything in place. Agroecology is simply a framework for activating what we have here already. And Coco Hill is a practical case for micro, small, and medium businesses within the Caribbean. So regeneration methods rebuild. Knowledge sharing is how we accelerate that. What we learn on that hillside in St. Joseph should not stay on that hillside. And I say that personally, as my own path to agroecology actually started when Wazamaki Farms partnered with Wired to teach permaculture design in Barbados. And since then, that experience with Erle has changed things for me. And that is the true power of knowledge sharing. So to our partners at COLEAD, IICA, and fellow entrepreneurs here today, employ agroecological alternatives and open more community workshops for a Caribbean that is serious about food sovereignty, ecological restoration, and real economic independence. Thank you.
Rashonda, I want to thank you for that sermon. You sounded like you were really trying to get us as disciples of agroecology. I'm convinced. I am convinced. I really have to applaud your passion. I must say, you started off by saying that this delivery will result, we hope, in real change. I think you have converted some of us. I really have to applaud the work that has been undertaken by Coco Hill Forest. Starting, I must admit, most times persons just present the positives, and you gave us a bit of the challenges, the uphill battle, some of the constraints. But talking about the process for change to take us from one point to the next was really useful, at least for me, and I think for our audience as well. And I think a key standout is how you all were able to build resilience, particularly to these climatic events and the weather systems, the hurricanes and the tropical storms. I think that is noteworthy. And I like what Coco Hill Forest is doing in terms of the permaculture, the agritourism, the value added, because it's like a full value chain that you're doing a number of things. And the whole nutrient cycling to the syntropy, I think that is important. So again, we really want to thank you for your presentation and the words of wisdom. I hope that we are placing our comments in the chat, colleagues. Place your comments in the chat, ask questions. We have expertise here that we should take advantage of. I don't want to use the word advantage. It doesn't sound too resilient or sustainable, but we want to really benefit from the expertise that we have here. We want that capacity building. As Rashonda said, we want change. We want impact. So Rashonda, again, thank you. And I want to also recognize that you stuck to the time. We're going to come back to you in a bit, Rashonda. I'm jumping back across the Caribbean Sea again, and I'm going to go to St. Lucia, beautiful island of St. Lucia. And now we're going to speak to Damian Adjodha. And Damian came highly recommended. He is the founder and director of New Flower Regenerative Garden in St. Lucia, St. Lucie. Damian is a regenerative agriculture and agroecological systems practitioner. He has over 25 years of experience in natural farming. His work focuses on ecosystem restoration, soil regeneration, and water conservation in St. Lucia. He is the founder and director of New Flower Regenerative Garden, a family-run farm that serves as a training and education center dedicated to regenerating local soils and demonstrating best practices for small-scale sustainable farming. I know that Damian has been an active participant in various climate resilient fora, and he has been sharing his knowledge, and he is a real practitioner, as I said in his introduction. We are privileged to have his participation here. Damian, I want to welcome you and ask you to begin your presentation. Please, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Allister, and warm greetings to everybody. And I thank IICA and the partners networking me in to this amazing project. I'd also like to thank Anja and Rashonda for their amazing experience, sharing their experience in their agroecological journey. I think that is invaluable. Today, I would like to take a slightly different approach, and I'm going to zoom out. And if we can see the next slide, please, and approach agroecology as a mindset, as a paradigm shift, and almost an esoteric journey. And then secondly, we're going to zoom all the way back in to the micro scale and look at this, well, get into the weeds literally and talk about agroecology in action and how to apply the principles to on the farm problems and social business problems within the Caribbean. So agroecology began with the awakening of human intelligence. So our minds are agroecological inventions. And I think that's the broad mindset I'd like to start from, that our first teachers were the ecosystems and the plants and the animals that we lived in, even before language. Our minds and the wiring in our mind was made from nature and the close studying of nature. We can call this eating from the tree of life. I won't talk about what language and other things brought, but if there's the tree of life, we know what the other tree is. But agroecology is a deep ecological systems intelligence, orchestrating abundance. And we are the conductors of this orchestra. So that is the broad mindset I'd like us to apply now to practical examples. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so yeah, I'm experimenting with AI, so it helped me make this slide. It made a few mistakes, but I think the picture is clear that this is a food web. And so I'm first modeling coming down a level from the esoteric to the small, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, which we fit in there somewhere. So New Flower Regenerative Garden is there in the center, and we practice more than 4 things, but these are the 4 major things we do. We do an agroecological learning center. We do demonstration or model farms. We, of course, produce, and we do consultation. So if you go into the details of this, which I won't go through each point right now, but all of them relate to other things. Some of them go through the middle, but some of them can connect directly to the other things. So this is web thinking or network thinking, and this is resilience in action. So resilience brought through diversity. And it's not just more things is better. Everything we do should have a synergy with at least one other thing. So I have a rule of thumb that if an activity doesn't serve at least 2 and ideally 3 or 4 other purposes, I don't do it. So every move we make as an agroecologist has to be, well, not has to be, but is best done thinking of the synergies of the entire system. So for example, our family farm is a family food sovereignty production facility where we are trying to eat everything that we grow and hope one day to eat only what we grow. And then we are very close to a community, literally minutes away, and we need to support that community. We need to make money, of course, so we grow specialty high-end crops for restaurants, and we are hoping to move into value-added products. So I'm ashamed to say that I haven't visited Anja's farm yet, but I'm sure this network will link us together. Through the mycelia, we'll get drawn together and we will synergize eventually. And so that's an example of how networks, even this entire system is networking agroecologically different projects together. Okay, we'll move to the next slide, please. Okay, following the same network layout, this time the roots are connecting the different weeds together or functions of them. And this is kind of the core of what I've learned over the last 25 years practicing agroecology, is that we have to look at things differently. And there's wisdom in the weeds. And we've probably, most of us, heard of weeds as indicators of current soil health. We've probably also thought of them as kind of their impact on ecosystems' health and efficiency. But I think there are also the storytellers of the history of land. It's essentially the memory of the ecosystem. We're going to get into nutgrass, which is around the top left quadrant there. And we're going to dive into a specific weed problem that we have here, and I'm sure that many on this have had or know about. And also, we want to look at weeds as the soil security system. So in that illustration, we see seeds and tubers in corms, which I will make the argument from an agroecological perspective, these seeds and these things are actually part of the living soil. So we know there's microorganisms, we know there's macroorganisms. These are macroorganisms, and they are the memory bank and the apps. They're the apps of the soil that have been uploaded into the soil over time, and these apps are called on when needed. So when different conditions require them to come forward, they come forward. And so separating them from the soil matrix, I think that's going to end. And because even conventional intense farming that solarizes or sterilizes soil, these things still come back. And so if something is that resilient and can't be removed from a system, then it's part of the system. So that's an example of how agroecological thinking has to shift our mindset towards the things that we're facing. So I think as we move into the next slide, which is not as pretty, but had to be linear in this instance to compare things side by side. So this first chart is comparing legacy agricultural problems on the top of it horizontally. And then on the vertical left, we're looking at the kind of conventional ways of seeing and knowing these problems and dealing with them. So since we were talking about nutgrass, let's start with the first column. So nutgrass infestations reoccur every year despite labor-intensive weeding. Now, I use nutgrass not only because it's something that I've been battling with for many years, but have changed my approach now. I'm not going to lie and say it's not an issue on my farm. We do intense bed production as well as agroforestry. And so it is something that is an issue. But after going to a CARDI learning trip last year when I was in St. Vincent, it was conferred to us that nutgrass is actually the most costly and intense labor activity, the removal of it, in all tropical agriculture. So in other words, its infestations cost more to farmers as a pest than other pests and diseases. And this kind of struck me because I was looking at the soils there and it was basically a lawn of nutgrass. And I think that if we see the wisdom in the weeds and understand that the nutgrass tubers are part of the living soil and they're part of the security system of the living soil, then we maybe have been approaching this wrong. So before we get to solutions, let's talk about how we've done it conventionally. So the conventional description of the perceived problem that limits production is when we, of course, allow it to take over. The narrative is it limits nutrients, water, and crop rooting, of course, affecting yield. So how do we treat it? Of course, we use herbicides that, of course, don't really affect it that much. And then also intense weeding, especially right after cultivation, is the standard international practice. The conventional outcomes is you can get it under control when the canopy of the crop gets up. You think it's out of there, but then when you till the soil again, guess what? So I think this story is a common story across Africa and South America and all of the tropics. And I think we can all relate to this. So we're going to get to potential other ways to approach this in the next slide. But before we move to that, let's look at, I know something that IICA and the partners on are primarily tasked with addressing, and that small scale farming is financially unviable in harsh tropical environments. And I think this is a valid claim, although we can have a long debate about it, but that's a basic problem. And the conventional perception of this problem is that inconsistent production and scale cannot meet demand, right? I've been to countless workshops where we are told that to address this, we have to farm as a business and we have to meet the market. And this happens, and we're not directly encouraged, but the consequence is improved agrochemicals and this and that, or inputs generally, whether it's manures or compost or natural sprays. We're encouraged to utilize these things to address this issue. The outcome is that few innovative operations do succeed. Of course, we have massive success stories everywhere. But if we're looking at it honestly, most small and medium farms are very close to subsistence, and most farmers have to rely on other sources of income as well. And so that's kind of the status quo for both of these problems within the conventional system. And over the last 50 years, we've been trying to figure out ways, and I'm so thankful that we've come to what I think is the solution, which is agroecological methods. Last slide, please. Okay, so basically the same problems, of course, but on the left column, we see a little bit more detail in the agroecological approach. And when we're dealing with the problem, we need to focus on root causes, not just the symptoms. So what I would say is that nut grass is not a root problem. It is a symptom of another root problem. And I think understanding the ecological niche is the first step to restoring ecological balance. And so we do this by asking, what services does nut grass provide? So this is agroecology in action. And I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but ecosystem service providers is what I want us all to take away from my contribution, is that we are providing, nutgrass is providing a service to the ecosystem. Okay, so I will not go through all of the writing here, but the way we treat this in an agroecological manner is we need to outcompete the nutgrass by infringing on its niche. So if we know that nutgrass is taking over bare cultivated loose soil, then we can't have bare cultivated loose soil for enough period of time for it to establish itself. And so we need to think about increasing our photosynthetic density, which is the amount of solar energy that we can convert to sugar per square area. And through that canopy and cover, the layers of syntropy that can be taken from the agroforestry scale and even down to the crop production scale, we need to intercept all of that light and protect the soil. And then the nutgrass's niche becomes irrelevant. And so that would be an agroecological approach to handling nutgrass. We do this through minimal tillages, mulching, biointensive relayed intercrops. I would love to talk about that later in the conversations. Controlled fallow periods, and we're maximizing diversity and vigor. Just to conclude, I just want to speak quickly about the small businesses.
Yeah, Damian, I'll have to ask you to wrap up in 30 seconds. I'll let you go over,
No
but
problem.
if you could wrap up in 30 seconds, thank you.
Okay, so marginalized farmers on marginal lands use methods that further degrade their systems. That's the core problem. That's the root of the problem. It is not anything really else. And also our history of farming, commodity farming, sugar, bananas, subverted our natural development in natural farming. And our systems need to, again, reboot, reset, and maximize diversity, knowledge, and experience, and increasing agroecological regenerative knowledge density. So see how this column compares to the actual management of weeds. It's the same principles that apply. Diversity and rigor is how we use agroecology to rebuild soils and systems. Love to talk about soils some more. I'm a soil scientist and I hope to speak more about this. So I thank all of you all for your attention, and I apologize for going a little bit over.
No apologies. I know I cut off the other persons, but I allowed you to continue because I was in the learning phase. I was gathering all that information you were sharing as a small farmer myself, and often being plagued by nutgrass. The information shared was invaluable. And, you know, I like the whole focus on interconnectivity. And when you put up that slide, wisdom in the weeds, I was like, where is this going? Because I can't see where's the wisdom in the weeds? So it was real learning for me, understanding the weeds as storytellers. Very interesting perspective on weed management. And, you know, I hope I will stray a bit and allow my colleagues later on to bring you back in because you said you had some more information to share. So if we have some more time, I'll want to ask you to come back in and give us another little lesson today. Let me just say that, Damian. I'm gonna put a plug in for that. But thank you again for the intervention. Thank you for sharing. I think we have a lot of questions and comments that we'll place in the chat. Again, I want to say that just to remind persons also, the session is being recorded. And I want to encourage persons, you can go to www.agriinnovators.org, where we have the sessions recorded, where we have the profiles of the presenters, etc. I want to encourage you to go to that site, agriinnovators.org. You can get a lot of information on the work that we are doing. We have the recordings, we have the presentations. Please take advantage of this facility. I want to wrap up my moderation of this particular panel, but it would be remiss of me to not recognize all the behind-the-scenes work that is taking place by my colleagues from COLEAD as well as IICA. I want to recognize the efforts of my colleague, Dr. Roxanne Waite, who would have put together the panel of experts alongside our colleagues Nina Desanlis, I think I keep pronouncing it incorrectly, and of course, Ahuefa Suklu. They have been doing tremendous work behind the scenes. I am just the one here rambling. But I really want to thank them for their hard work, and of course, Ines from COLEAD, and special thanks to the interpreters. With that said, I want to recognize the next moderator. I would have mentioned her earlier, and I'm talking about Nina Desanlis. Nina has been working hard behind the scenes and in the forefront as well, getting all of this done. Now she's going to come and moderate the second panel. I will leave her to introduce the second panel. But let me just welcome Nina. Nina is the project officer and lead for this intervention at COLEAD. She is a project officer in the Networks and Alliances Department at COLEAD, and she develops and coordinates global partnerships to support entrepreneurship development and sustainability in the agri-food sector across the global South countries. She co-organizes agri-food webinars aimed at showcasing innovations of farmer-led businesses and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises with key international partners such as IICA. And I want to say Nina holds an MSc in Environmental Science for Sustainability from King's College in the UK. She also has a BSc in Public Administration from Erasmus University in Rotterdam. She's an advocate for sustainable development, international cooperation, and climate justice, and she works assiduously to promote resilient and inclusive solutions for communities and food systems worldwide. Nina is leading the charge in expanding the collaboration between IICA and COLEAD, particularly with our agricultural, health, and food safety programs, as well as our programs with respect to bioeconomy and insertion into Latin America. So it's really a privilege and an honor to introduce Nina and ask her to moderate this second panel. Nina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Allister. Thank you very much for this introduction and for moderating the first panel. Hello, everyone. I probably already know a few of you, but it's nice to see so many participants today. Well, thank you to the entrepreneurs of the first panel, to Anja, Rashonda, and Damian. It was both interesting and engaging, highlighting the different challenges and opportunities of adopting agroecological practices in Barbados and St. Lucia, and in the Caribbean more broadly, of course. So thank you very much. We'll go now to the second panel, and we will hear insights from experts in the sector. So we will first hear from Margarita Fernandez. Margarita joined the Caribbean Agroecology Institute as executive director in January 2015, after nearly 20 years working on transdisciplinary action research and the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of international cooperation projects in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Laos, Mexico, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Venezuela, and the USA. She specializes in transformative agroecology and food systems, sustainable livelihoods, and climate resilience, with a focus on participatory-based approaches. Margarita has worked with multi-actor teams at the research practice Policy Nexus to link evidence with action and policy change. Margarita has over a dozen articles published in peer-reviewed journals, book chapters, and literature. She holds a PhD in agroecology from the University of Vermont and a master in social ecology from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Thank you, Margarita, for being here today with us. I pass you the floor.
Thank you so much, Nina, and also want to extend thanks to IICA, to Allister, to Ines from the team from COLEAD for inviting me. It's been incredible to hear the first three speakers, and I'm very inspired. All the speakers covered a lot of the topics that we work on at my organization, and I'm happy to be a part of a webinar that actually is bridging the English-speaking Caribbean with the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, which needs to be done more. I don't think it's done enough. So I am going to share my slides from my computer, and I will be giving a little bit of background about our organization, the Caribbean Agroecology Institute. And then if there's time, I added a couple of other slides and I went past the 6 slides. But if I go past the 10 minutes, I don't have to do those last slides. But I just wanted to give a little insight into one of our projects that's Caribbean-wide study. So I'm going to share. Please let me know if you can see that. Does that look good, Nina? Okay, great. So, the Caribbean Agriculture Institute is a nonprofit based in the United States that works in the Caribbean, mostly in Cuba. We were founded in 2005. I myself have been working in Cuba since 1998 and on issues of agroecology since the 90s as well, in a number of different roles. And so we work to catalyze knowledge exchange, build capacity, and support transition to resilient agroecological systems that provide for sustainable livelihoods rooted in justice and equity in Cuba and the Caribbean. And so our partnerships are really with a wide diversity of types of actors, from farmers to researchers, NGOs, policymakers, and social entrepreneurs across Cuba and the wider Caribbean, though we mostly work in Cuba. So, oops, it's not advancing. There we go. Sorry about that. So I wanted to just present this slide. Agroecology has gained a lot of, it's become quite mainstream and it's been adopted by a number of different institutions globally, NGOs globally, and we really did start though from farmers and farmer movements, and as Damian mentioned, right, it's very much a mirror of our minds, and our minds in the mirror of our ecosystems. And so probably when the FAO developed these 10 elements of agroecology is when it became more popular, and these 13 principles are from the HLPE, the High Level Panel of Experts. And then these 5 levels of food transition is from Stephen Gleason, who's one of the leaders of agroecology from academia. But really it started from the indigenous knowledge and Afro-Indigenous wisdom, especially in the Caribbean. And so I wanted to make sure to mention that. And also to mention that oftentimes we think of agroecology as just the ecology of agriculture, seeking to mimic ecological processes, which it definitely is. But it really goes beyond that, to look at the challenging the status quo, addressing power, inequities, and systemic injustices in the food system at large, and really seeking to understand and redesign food systems using not just ecological, but also social and political and cultural principles to really look at regenerating and having a more just food system. So it is really about a paradigm shift and looking at the multifunctional benefits of shifting our agricultural system. So I'm going to talk about the Caribbean Agriecology to work. We work in 4 main domains of transformation. So I'll present each of the 4, and then if there's time, I'm going to present about this Caribbean agroecology mapping project that we've been working on for a couple of years that I think will be really interesting and relevant to this team, this group of participants. So our first program area is about learning alliances and regional exchanges, and this webinar really is evidence of the importance of this type of work, where we need to bring all the different actors, from farmers to researchers to policymakers to social entrepreneurs, to learn from each other, to have this information sharing. And so we have these 4 key projects right now. And I wanted to just highlight the one on the bottom right, which is the Research Initiative for Sustainable Development of Cuba, now in its 9th year. It's really become a community of practice with over 400 partners in 10 provinces, advancing sustainability and climate resilience across Cuban society. And today in Cuba, this is even more important because not only the very severe crisis, economic and food crisis that's happening, it's opening up this space for grassroots innovations to happen. And there is an economic transition happening where micro, small, and medium enterprises were legalized just 3 or 4 years ago. And so it's opened up this new space for Cuban leaders to open up small businesses, which has really not been possible under the current political system, economic system in Cuba since 1969. So it's an opportunity to promote space for these different new entrepreneurs to share how can we have a small business in the agri-food sector that is socially and ecologically responsible. So these communities of practice are really important. The second program area is focused on community and field-based projects where we really are resourcing frontline communities, grassroots movements who are leading the charge in transitioning our food systems towards agroecology. And the one I want to focus on here is renewable energy, and this is, I think, a challenge across the Caribbean and across the world, really, but especially in Cuba today because of the oil blockade that they're suffering through. For many years, they have been already working towards an energy transition, and so has our organization. But right now, it's sort of we've doubled down on resourcing and strengthening family farmers' capacity to really adopt these renewable energy models and systems to irrigate fields, to power on-farm equipment, to distribute the harvest locally. And I wanted to mention the importance of supporting beyond the farm towards food processors and the mini industries, because food loss is such a huge issue in the tropics. And in Cuba, I think the number is something at 40% of food is lost, is wasted. So there's such an important opportunity and need to focus on investing in the post-harvest handling and distribution, and creating these food hubs, and really helping to support the local food economy so that we can scale agroecology. So I'm going to leave that slide there. Like, there's plenty more I can talk about, but the third area that we work on, domain of transformation, is participatory action research and the co-creation of knowledge, which is an integral part of agroecology as a science movement and practice. And here we really are bringing together traditional and scientific knowledge and working with farmers and communities to identify what are the questions they want to ask, what are their research questions, what are their problems, and then working together through a number of different participatory methodologies to go through that process to then be able to build power and knowledge and have them feel like they're agents of the change that they are seeking to implement. And I wanted to highlight this one on strengthening local food system governance, which is part of a regional Latin American Caribbean project that's funded by the Agroecology Fund and IDRC from Canada. There are 7 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean participating, and Cuba is one of them. And we, with our project, focused on translating and operationalizing a few quite progressive policies that were recently passed in Cuba. There's a new agroecology law, there's a new food sovereignty law, and there's a relatively new sort of decentralization of decision-making power at the municipal level. It's like a local development law that, you know, looks great on paper, but like often happens, translating good policy into practices is not always as easy. And so this participatory action research project is really looking at that. How do we translate these good laws into practice? And so as part of that, we developed a methodology to measure the level of agroecological transition on farms. And so for anybody who's interested in that methodology, I'm happy to share that. And really the focus on governance and local system governance is just such an important part of agroecology. So I just wanted to highlight that, and happy to share information from that research. And then the fourth area that we work on, which is also so important for sort of agroecological transitions, is amplifying voices and shifting narratives. There's still very much a dominant narrative that agroecology is backwards, that it doesn't produce enough, that it's really just an type of agriculture for moments of crisis. And so we work to shift those narratives and provide evidence that can back up the multifunctional, multi-benefits of agroecology. We put out a documentary called Agroecology, Our Future, that documents the movement in Cuba and sort of looks at both the successes but also the challenges of the movement in Cuba. And so you can find that on our website. And we also have a knowledge hub on our website that sort of collates publications coming out of Cuba and the Caribbean, but it is mostly Cuba, about agroecology in its different dimensions. So how am I doing on time? Because those are the 6 slides that I have.
I think you can wrap it up.
Okay.
You have 1 minute.
1 minute? Oh, perfect. So I am just going to show quickly, we did a Caribbean mapping study of actors working on agroecology. So it's just a quick 1 slide from the report where it's an active database. We have about 334 actors right now identified across different types of actors. Most of them are in Cuba, which is not surprising. It's the largest island in the Caribbean and also is a leader in the Caribbean and in the world in agroecology. But the report will be coming out soon. We document not only the actors, but also the strengths, challenges, and then we have 10 recommendations that I'm just going to show here very quickly. You can get a quick view of them. A lot of them were already identified by the 3 previous speakers. And happy to share that when it comes out. Please send me an email. My email is there. And it was really a pleasure to be able to share our experience with everyone on the call, and I really look forward to being able to build new connections and stay in touch. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margarita, for this presentation of what the Caribbean Agroecology Institute do. Very interesting. Also to see a bit, it's still the Caribbean, but a bit of a different region in the Caribbean. Now, supposedly, next speaker would be Erle, but I think he isn't here. Hopefully, he will join in a couple of minutes. But then we will go directly to Pieterjan. Okay. So we will hear from Dr. Pieterjan de Bauw. Pieterjan is a senior project manager for research and innovation brokerage at COLEAD. He holds a PhD in bioscience engineering from KU Leuven, and he is trained as a systems agronomist with experience addressing food system challenges across diverse agro-ecosystems, primarily in Europe and in Africa. He has worked across academia and the fertilizer industry, operating in multi-stakeholder and public-private environments. At COLEAD, Pieterjan coordinates research initiatives focused on sustainable crop production, integrated pest management, soil and plant health, and agribusiness development in horticultural value chains. His work includes supervising field trials and technology pilots, developing and validating sustainable practices adapted to ACP context, and contributing to the COLEAD Sustainability Self-Assessment System. He regularly contributes to scientific publication and technical guidance material. Pieterjan, the floor is yours, and I will be sharing your presentation.
Thank you, Nina, for this very long introduction. My presentation today will be a bit more conceptual and a bit more, let's say, theoretical. But the idea is to bring some critical reflections and nuances on all the concepts that we heard today. And so I will talk a bit about sustainable agriculture and agroecology, what it is, where it's situating exactly. So you can go to the next slide. So first I will speak a bit about what sustainable agriculture is, and then I will talk about some challenges and opportunities when we want to move towards sustainable agriculture. And then I will deal about the challenges with translating principles into practice. You can go to the next slide. So why is it important to nuance sustainable agriculture today? Well, Nina, you can go to the next slide. Today, more and more expectations are coming for agriculture. So we have many diverging expectations from agriculture, and they lead to heavy politicized and polarized debates. I think you can click all the way through previous one. Yeah.
Sorry.
So on the one hand, there is the need for increased food production to feed a growing population, with increased pressure on land for other purposes. And on the other hand, we have the desire for more sustainable and eco-friendly farming practices that are also socially fair. Then there is also the contrast between the need for food security, but also the need for environmental and social stewardships. So it's all clear that we need to transition towards food systems that are able to preserve natural resources, adapt and mitigate to climate change, meet the needs of rural and urban communities, satisfy changing consumer demands, etc., while also increasing the production that we will see in the next slide. Because, Nina, you can go to the next slide. Because there is still a population challenge, a global population challenge, and a yield gap challenge. So we all know that the global population is steadily growing. By 2050, we are reaching almost 10 billion persons. And thus the demand for food is also increasing. With this, we see also a lot of strong regional population explosions. For example, in Sub-Saharan Africa, there is a very strong growth. And in these regions, very often we see that post-production increases of agriculture often followed area expansion, and that there is still suboptimal use of the current use of agricultural land. So that's putting a lot of pressure on the environment. And we see that these areas are also often overlapping with poor agricultural technology adoption and also huge yield gaps. That means that there is still a very big gap between what is actually obtained from agriculture in terms of output compared to what is possible in terms of unit of land, for example. That said, you can go back. Sorry, one more point is that said, it's important to also say that more and more studies are indicating that more productive agriculture is also reducing the pressure on natural ecosystems. By producing more food on less land, it allows also natural habits to be conserved and to be restored. So that's the land sparing principle, and there is more and more theories supporting this principle. So now you can go to the next slide. So what are then the challenges and the opportunities when we want to move to sustainable agriculture? Next slide, Nina. So if we ask ourselves what is sustainable agriculture exactly, and we look into literature, we come to the conclusion that there is no clear definition, no simple definition, but that there is consensus that it needs to be in line with the definition of sustainable development. And thus that sustainable agriculture need to be able to meet the current needs of society without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it should be encompassed along three central pillars, being social, economic, and environmental. Next point. So sustainability criteria, they are measured by indicators, but it's challenging because these indicators for agriculture, they might be relevance, the relevance may vary in place and time. So that means that what is sustainable in terms of economic, environmental, or social criteria, it can vary according to the local context. So the message is that what is sustainable in one context, it may not be sustainable in another context where the agroecological and socioeconomic factors are very different. So the conclusion is one size fits all solutions for sustainable agriculture do not exist. Next slide, please. So there is no simple definitions, but still people, they like simplifications, but agriculture is complex. So while we try to simplify a complex issue, we see that there are a lot of contrasting ideologies or narratives or concepts being arising, and that they are being proposed as the pathway to achieve sustainable agriculture. And that we see that they are being spread and advocated for by different stakeholders who may have diverse backgrounds, diverse agendas, or contrasting ambitions. So I've seen it here now through the many interesting presentations that were given today, that several concepts are being mentioned throughout next to each other and also sometimes overlapping. So some of the popular concepts today that are influencing the public debate are, for example, agroecology, regenerative agriculture, carbon farming, climate smart agriculture, agroforestry, carbon farming, and all these concepts are a bit different. They overlap, but they have different, let's say, principles or theories. And the challenge is that the global food system is very complex, and that the differences in agro-food systems include, for example, different scales of operations, different agronomic practices, different socioeconomic circumstances. So there are diverse challenges, diverse needs, and diverse dynamics in each agroecological system. Next slide, please. So the key takeaways from this information or this assessment is that there are several sustainability concepts. They coexist, they overlap sometimes, but they are not mutually exclusive. Also, these concepts, we see that the popularity of these concepts is changing in time, and that's often a response to trends. So agriculture, we all agree, it's inherently complex and very broad concepts. For example, agroecology can lose some importance, nuance, and practical realities when it's generalized across diverse contexts or regions. So due to this global diversity, it often remains unclear to stakeholders what such concepts are meaning in practice and how they should be implemented. And that's exactly the challenge here, how to translate principles into practice. I think it's key that we need to recognize and embrace these global variations, and at the same time that we need to take into account these local nuances. So you can go to the next slide, Nina. So I like to present this example to you. For example, this is 36 square kilometer of soybean production, one in Brazil, one in Kenya. And you can immediately see it's a completely different system. If you ask yourself which one of these agroecosystems is most sustainable, there is no clear answer. It can be both. It's all depending on the indicators you're looking to. Is it if you look at yield per hectare, the income per capita, the pest pressure, the pesticide use per hectare, soil organic carbon, etc. So it's all depending on what you are looking at and which indicators you're using. So it's just you can reflect on this, and then we can come back on this later. Next slide, please. So the challenges of translating principles of agroecology into practice. I want to bring some nuances. So if you go to the next slide. So this the previous speaker has also presented this concepts of agroecology. So indeed, it's built around principles, 13 principles, which were then translated into 10 principles by FAO. And that's exactly the challenge, because some of the principles are rather broad, and then you can question how it should be translated into practice exactly. You can go to the next slide. So to define a bit more agroecology, what we have observed is that the main stakeholders talking about this are mostly NGOs, non-profits, increasingly some politicians and development partners, mostly also in the European area. And we have perceived that more traditional, bigger agro-industries and commercial farming systems are generally less involved in the debates around agroecology, and that these players are more tending to use concepts like regenerative agriculture, etc. So concerning the three pillars of sustainability, the concept claims to include environmental, social, and economic sustainability aspects, but there is some criticism that economic aspects might sometimes be underexposed, which is also reflected in some of the previous presentations. That's, yeah, especially at the early stages, there might also be some economic challenges to, let's say, to get this off ground, this type of systems. So some general nuances with a global perspective. It's a broad concept with multiple dimensions. There are reported challenges to translate the broad principles into real agronomic practice, because sometimes, yeah, it can be anything. And some criticisms has been saying that it's sometimes more perceived as ideologic rather than rational or pragmatic. So additionally, it must be said that it can bring benefits in certain intensive agroecosystems, but we need to be careful that in extensive low input systems, that it's not putting more pressure on land and population. So you can go to the next slide, Nina. Looking at agriculture in ACP countries, we can say that these type of systems are very much characterized by low inputs, mixed cropping systems, minimal use of pesticides and fertilizers. Very often are already locked into local markets. Also, poor capital and technological investments. Often intrinsic poor soil fertility and degradation, and very often also low levels of mechanization already. And looking at these, let's say, characteristics, we can say that it's all these are in essence already somehow agroecological. But consequently, this is often going hand in hand with low attainable yields and large post-harvest losses. And that's again putting more pressure on the land and leading to further conversion of natural land, further expansion of low input, extensive agriculture. So again, this is then associated with poverty levels, absence of alternative labor markets, and poor investments in the sector. So the conclusion here I want to say is that good practice in the context of sustainable production in ACP countries, it's not necessarily the same as good practice, which might be most appropriate for European or US farmers, for example. Next slide, please. So I just want to share two experiences that we've faced from close by, where that's the translation of principles into practice has gone a bit wrong. And it's just to show how context-blind application of principles can lead to unintended outcomes. For example, the input reduction principles, we've seen that, for example, in a major part of sub-Saharan Africa, Decades of nutrient mining and the very old soils left the soil very depleted, and there is a lot of degradation ongoing. So to restore the soil fertility, there is a big need to increase the use of mineral fertilizers, and African governments have committed to increase fertilizer access and use because for the moment it's very low, too low. And then we've seen that the reduction principle of agroecology has led, if it's blindly implemented and we want to further reduce mineral inputs, mineral fertilizer inputs on these type of soils, it's really leading to unsustainable outcomes. So sometimes it's also in contrast with regional policy efforts, especially where nutrient deficits are driving land degradation. So that's, for example, where if you blindly translate the principles into practice, it leads to an unwanted outcome and an unsustainable outcome. Another example is on the recycling
Pieterjan,
principles. Yes?
just saying that you have like 30 seconds left.
Okay, yes. You can read it later on. You can go to the next slide. I think we are coming to the key takeaways. So the key takeaways of my presentation here today is that a principle that is beneficial in one context can be counterproductive in another. Some initiatives to address the environmental issues can have devastating effects as well on a sector if they are not well implemented. So we need to take care of how to implement principles into practice. I will, in view of time, quickly go through these. So translating the concepts into agronomic practice needs always more technical support, knowledge transfer, and research and innovation. So these are key components to do this right. And then integrating an adaptation according to the three sustainability pillars to the local pillars to local context is key for sustainability. So what I mean here is that we need to take care of the local context, and that's the only way that we can achieve true sustainability and not focus blindly on principles. That's the key message. Thanks for the attention, and we can talk about this later on.
Right. Thank you, Pieterjan. Thank you very much for your presentation. Interesting indeed to see also kind of the other arguments and the real challenges about integrating agroecological practices. So thank you for giving this nuance to this topic. Now, I believe Erle is in the webinar. Great, yes, I see him. Hello, Erle. Welcome. So Erle will be our last panelist. And up, so Erle Rahaman-Noronha is the founder and director of Wasamaki Ecosystems, a multi-generational permaculture farm in Trinidad, dedicated to regenerative agriculture, education, and sustainable living. Since 2007, he has taught permaculture design and consulted on projects across the Caribbean, bringing extensive hands-on experience in tropical regenerative systems. He also serves as managing director of the Caribbean Permaculture Research Institute in Barbados and has led major ecological restoration initiatives. Erle, thank you for being here with us today, and I pass you the floor.
Great. Thank you, Nina. Sorry, there was a bit of a mix-up in my timing. I was on another meeting. Thank you again for everyone that's here. So I have been teaching permaculture for the last, and been practicing it for the last 30 years. Practicing it for 30 years and teaching it for probably the last 20. Really, permaculture is a way of incorporating regenerative design into any kind of system, so that a lot of systems out there, biodynamics, organic farming, agroecology, agroforestry, they all fall into a permaculture design, so that you can use a permaculture design to incorporate all of these different methods in different sites of your farm. Can I go to the next slide? Can someone go to the next slide, please. Right. Okay. Oop. So this, yes. Thank you. So this is Wasamaki Ecosystems. We are a 30-acre farm. As you can see, we are heavily forested. When the project started 27, 30 years ago, there were no trees on this site. It was an orchard. There were some citrus trees, but it was heavily contaminated really with Roundup, Gramaxone, and a lot of the toxic chemicals that were used in industrial orchard practices. And over the last 27 years, we've converted it more into an ecosystem where we do a variety of different things, and we have regenerated a lot of the site. And as you can see around the site, we still, one of our biggest issues that we have is fire and deforestation, and now a lot of encroachment from housing that is also contaminating or could possibly lead to contamination of our water system. The next slide, please. Right, so this is what the site used to look like 27 years ago. You can see that there wasn't much forest on site. In permaculture, a lot of what we do is design the site to first trap water, and the second is to actually increase how you move around the site, analyze how you move around the site, and design for your workforce. We at Wasamaki only have 4 people that work on our site. So me, my wife, my daughter, and her husband are the 4 people that are on the site. So it is a lot of work, and it is a lot of being very efficient, and it is very difficult in Trinidad to find agricultural labor. So within these kind of constraints, we've created this ecosystem that we work with. The next slide, please. So from a practical point of view, for people that don't know about permaculture, permaculture designs sites based on sustainability. And the first thing that we look at is how do humans that are the main interaction on the site, how do they move across the site? And if you can see the red line on the picture, that red line signifies where most of the people on the farm move every day. And as you can realize, there is a pattern that people follow, and that pattern dictates how we lay out things efficiently so that there's not a lot of time wasted moving between different areas of the site. So the red line dictates where people move. The little blue line right at the right-hand side of the farm represents the different zones. So in permaculture, there are 5 zones that you normally work with. You start with your house. Zone 1 is areas that you provide food for your house, so that ideally, if there is a situation where you on your site are growing your own food, you then are not concerned with a lot of the other things that are happening out in the global economy, as long as you can feed yourself. So in permaculture, we always try and get you to feed yourself first before you try and sell anything. And how we approach this is by having areas zoned where your zone 1 and your zone 2, which are the areas just around your house, provide food for you and your orchard for your house. And then we have the zone 3, which is your production areas, which is those areas in green. Those are where we do our production. So we do some organic production. We do a lot of tropical flowers that we sell, which is a high value crop. And that pays for a lot of the work that happens on our farm. And then the zone 4, which is the long-term income for our farm, is the areas in white, where we've planted with different types of timber trees, things that will provide us with long-term income. So we started planting timber trees like cedar, mahogany, teak, and a lot of the local trees in 1997. And my daughter, who is now 26 years old, she has harvested some of the trees to actually build her house, so that within a multi-generational system, you can actually be now harvesting material that someone else in your family can be using. So it's designed in that way. So that is the white areas. And then in permaculture, a big part is encouraging biodiversity and living in balance with all the other life that lives on your site. So in a good permaculture system, you're not pushing the rest of the life away from you. You're actually trying to figure out how to integrate that life into your system and how to tolerate it and how to work with it. Because there are a lot of things in living systems that will actually help you. And I will go into more detail with that. So the whole of the yellow areas within this site are what we've created as wildlife corridors that allow wildlife to exist on our site, that allows movement of wildlife through our site. And it's normally situated along the rivers where there's water, so that during the dry season, the wildlife has access to water. Now, again, the ecosystem services that this biodiversity and this wildlife does for us is that a lot of the predators within our system, the frogs, the spiders, the snakes, they help control a lot of the pests that would tend to affect our plants that we are growing commercially. So that by encouraging a lot of these predators in the system, we are actually reducing the amount of work that we need, and we don't use any chemicals. So the snakes help control a lot of the rats. When we first purchased the farm, rats were a big issue because the previous owner used to kill all the snakes. But by us leaving that alone, we now have we don't have a rat problem. We have about 20 ponds on our farm, but we don't have a mosquito problem because we have a healthy bat population, as well as we have fish within all the ponds. So again, certain insectivorous bats will eat a lot of mosquitoes in the night. So certain bats can eat up to 1,000 mosquitoes a night. So by having a healthy bat population, you keep your mosquitoes in control. And then just all the lizards and the frogs help to also keep other pests that would otherwise affect our crops in balance in our system. And we have noticed that it takes a little while to create this stability in your system. It can take 3 or 4 years. So the initial first 4 years on our farm, as we transitioned to more of an eco-friendly system, we would have big blooms of different pests, but by leaving them alone and encouraging the predators, we would eventually bring balance back into the system. So in a permaculture design, there is 5 zones. Zone 1 and 2, where you produce for your house. Zone 3, where you have commercial production. Zone 4, where you have long-term commercial production, and Zone 5 that you kind of leave in a natural state to leave space for some of the rest of the life that is sharing the land with you. The next slide, please. So we at Wasamaki actually believe that practice is the best way of teaching people, so that we have a lot of hands-on workshops. Because we've noticed that a lot of people have all the theoretical knowledge, but they don't have the practical experience. And by us offering a site where people can come and learn how to use a shovel, how to use a machete, how to know how to use the correct tools, how to plant things, how to look at soil, things like that are very critical. So we're always having hands-on experiences that allow us to demonstrate some of this theoretical knowledge that people have and turn it into something that people can practically do. All right. And if you're interested in any of our workshops, you can always follow us on our social media. Next slide. So part of permaculture is also how you live and how you can live sustainably. So part of what we do at our site is we use a lot of natural resources. So we do a lot with building with clay, building with timber, building with bamboo, and using a lot of natural low carbon input materials as building material. So every so often we will run design courses and practical courses on how you can build with material that is on your site. Next slide. So again, building with natural materials gives you a lot of leeway in what you can do. This is the picture on the right-hand side is a kitchen that we have when we have internships. Again, most of the materials have been used from on site, and the picture on the left is the kitchen. The picture on the right is a compost toilet. So again, a compost toilet built out of clay. On our site, any material that is organic, including human waste, can be converted into a resource, and that can be, again, recycled within your site, right? So again, we try and practice and try and teach people all the ways that you can deal with organic matter to keep things within the loop without having to destroy things or move things off site. Next slide. We also practice and teach something called syntropic agriculture, where we look at how systems evolve so that every ecosystem has a certain intelligence in it. And we call this the intelligence of nature, where something moves from simple to complex. So that if you have a field with one crop in it, nature will naturally send all kinds of weeds to take up all the niches that are available in those areas. And if you try and fight all those weeds all the time, you will learn that you will be constantly in battle with nature. So syntropic agriculture is a way of planting systems that mimic how nature recolonizes a piece of land, so that by planting many different things together, you can actually get production. But instead of fighting with weeds all the time, you are using the different stratification of the plants to get production. And this is something that I'm just introducing, but it's something that can take a week of courses to actually learn about. All right. The next slide, sorry.
Yes, Erle, you have about 1 minute left.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll run through it quickly. So again, when we teach permaculture and we teach syntropic agriculture, it's a lot about increasing complexity within your soil. It's not about feeding your plants directly, but it's about feeding your entire system. It's about using mulches. It's about pruning frequently. It's about encouraging fungal network, and it's about eliminating chemicals. Next slide. In permaculture and syntropic agriculture, there are no such things as pests. We call pests, or what people call pests, optimizers, so that pests are always trying to get rid of weak things in your system. So if you have a pest problem, you normally have a weakness in your system, and either it's too much light or too little light, or lack of nutrients, or too much water, or too little water. So that when you see pests showing up in your system, it's normally something that is out of balance that needs to be corrected, which nature is doing for you. The next slide. Also weeds. Weeds tend to tell you that something is wrong with your system, as either too much light, poor soils, not enough nutrients. So in syntropic and permaculture systems, by stacking plants in certain areas, you cut down your weeds by taking up the spots that they would normally take up and using those plants for production. Next slide. And yes, that's the end. I'd just like to finish this with just asking this question: is what is your personal role in the ecosystem? And I ask this of everyone because us as humans understand what our role is within society. We understand what our role is within your family. But if you don't understand what is your personal role within the ecosystem, you don't know how to fix the ecosystem. And every other living organism within the ecosystem has a role that moves the ecosystem forward. But us as humans tend to seem to have a role that moves the ecosystem backwards, because we don't seem to understand what our clear role in the ecosystem is. So this is just an open question that I will send out to everyone. And this is our media links in case anyone needs to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erle. That was a very impressive and interesting presentation of the Wasamaki ecosystem. So thank you a lot. We run a bit late, but if it's fine with everyone, we will just finish 5 minutes late because it would still be nice if we could do the question and answer session. So I will first ask a question to Anja. So someone asked, how deep do you bury aging plant material and crop residues from previous harvests to benefit the soil and future crops?
I don't do any burying. I usually place it around, depending on what the tree is. For example, the cocoa, they tend to bear on the pod, so I give a buffer. For me, I try to have minimal disturbance, so the digging is restricted to planting. Over the years, I have let a lot of aging logs waste over the ground, and then mulching around the trees. And when I cut the grass, I let it fall where it is cut, and then pruning usually around the tree as well for water conservation. I'm not sure if anyone else does any digging. I'm happy to defer. Burying, sorry.
All
We
right.
at Wasamaki follow the same system. We just apply the material from the top and let it go into the soil.
And it seems to work quite well, especially for me. I like to do a lot of my mulching when it's still the rainy season to activate the decomposition process so that the nutrient cycling is faster. If we're putting grass on or clippings during the dry season, it seems to be a bit slower.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Anja. Thank you, Erle. Now I have a question for Rashonda. So someone asked, do you think your approach to regenerating plant resources and soil can be applied to degraded arid areas that have lost their natural vegetation, which was used for grazing in the past?
I would say yes. However, the execution is going to be different. The planning is going to be different, of course, because the land history is going to be different. The climate is going to be different. So whilst the model can be replicated, the exact detailed model shouldn't be replicated because of those things. So for example, I know in some areas in Africa, I'm not certain exactly where, but I know they've been planting, well, we call them dunks in Barbados, but I think they're jujubes. Yeah. They've been planting those across the continent, and that would be in a response to the arid areas, a lot of the drought, more of a drought response to those areas. If we tried planting jujubes or dunks in Coco Hill Forest, it definitely wouldn't have the same. It wouldn't have the same result. It wouldn't have the same aspect because again, the soil is different, climate is different. The jujubes more would more respond to a hotter, more arid, drier, a looser soil. They would interact more so with that environment as opposed to an environment like Coco Hills that's constantly moist, right? The soil type is much more compacted. I know those trees also like more looser soil. So again, we would plant different things to break up the soil in terms of vetiver grass that I mentioned. So it wouldn't really have the same effect if we try to do everything to the T in a replica. So yes, it can be redone. It can be done, just not the exact way. It does require a lot of observation of the land itself. It does require a lot of planning. And yeah, I would say that's more or less about it. Yeah, it's possible. Just have to find a way to make it specific to your area.
All right. Thank you for your answer, Rashonda. Now we have a question two questions for Damian. The first question is, Have you used woody plant species, trees or shrubs, to compete with your tuberous weeds? Are the species introduced to compete with the weeds native to the area or non-native? That's the first question. And the second question is, how do we deal with nutgrass in a lettuce or onion production? Damian, if you can answer.
Sure. Let me start with the second one first. It's traditional here in St. Lucia to do a lot of land preparations, fine tillage to get up a nice tilt for lettuce and onion production. So that's the traditional method. Unfortunately, that is also the ideal conditions for nutgrass. So I'm sure the person that put this forward spent a lot of time pulling out nutgrass. So what I've done on my farm is I do a series of crop rotations. So I start off with very fast-growing, vigorous crops on beds, like corn intercrop with cowpea, sometimes a cowpea and castor cover crop and I also mulch heavily with vetiver grass at that initial after plowing. So when you're creating the conditions for the nutgrass, you have to limit light to the soil and cover the soil up as quickly and as long as possible. I also then observe and go through and do spot weeding for any nutgrass that is starting to poke out. And because of the mulch, it's easy to pull out when the soil is mulched and not compacted. So I do the control then. Then I do relay cropping. So I will cut the corn stalks down if I have 2 outer rows on a 3.5-foot bed. And then I will furrow the soil. So I'm not going to plow the soil again, because plowing is going to pull up tubers for the nutgrass again. I just, with a V-shaped hoe, cut a line or a furrow, make 2 or 3 rows for whatever I'm planting. I grow a lot of lettuce as well. And then I am going to be transplanting into these furrows and remulching. So the key for nutgrass control is not to grow crops that take time to create canopy in the first succession, or you grow it very bio-intensively. So you decrease your spacing between rows and plants to get that cover as fast as possible. I hope that helps with that one. In terms of incorporating tubers and corms and woody species into my system, absolutely. So I do a practice called that I call bed ending, where all of my production beds are approximately, I either have 30-foot beds or 50-foot beds, and I always leave 5 to 10 feet at the end of my beds for perennial crops. This not only provides, so I grow cassava, pineapple, dasheen or taro, pigeon pea, and cowpea. A little guild or ecosystem at the end of my beds. So this is always creating habitat for pest predators and the like, but also just regenerating the soil in that area. And it's a place where I can accumulate old mulch or biological material and just enrich that soil. So I hope that helps. I'm trying not to take too long there.
Thank you very much, Damian. Thank you. We have no questions for Erle. I think your presentation came a bit at the end, so usually people spend a bit of time trying to come up with a question, but let's see if someone, anyways, if we have more questions, we can always follow up by email. We had one question directed towards Margarita, but she left. But I think Pieterjan could say a few things about it. Well, he basically answered it in his presentation. I will say the question now. So the question was, to what extent or by what percentage can we encourage and promote agroecology if we know in advance that the enormous and ever-increasing demand for agricultural products to feed the population can only be met by high-yield agriculture? So that's basically what you presented, Pieterjan, but if you want to say a few words, or if anyone wants to say a few words, it's our last question.
That's a very wide and difficult question. Of course, this is a lot of ethical debates. I think we need to indeed regards the need for increased food as well, and to make sure that it's the systems we encourage to apply are also responsible. But it's not a it's not a one solution fit all. So of course, agroecology has a place in some context, and also some extensive production practices can also make sense in some environments. So I don't have the numbers exactly on yeah. Say again the question. She asked for percentages or
Yeah, I mean, it was to what extent can we encourage and promote agroecology if we know that there is this
uh-huh.
dilemma between feeding the
Yes,
population
yes,
and
yes, yes.
yeah.
So it's also a personal question. I think the science is more and more against the wide promotion of this and the whole transition towards extensive agriculture, if we can say it this way. But of course, we need to transition towards more sustainable practices, and all the presentations that we've seen today, they embed a lot of sustainable practice that makes a lot of sense. So. There is no clear answer on this question, I think, and I think people can debate for weeks on this question. I don't know whether it's sufficiently responded.
Yes, I mean, as you said, there is no one answer to this question. There's more
Mhm,
of a debate, which unfortunately we don't really have time to
mhm.
go into. If any of the panelists want to add something quickly, you can open your mic. Otherwise, we will go to the conclusion.
I would like
Okay.
to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please, you go first. Please, Anja, go ahead.
I'll go after you. Go ahead, Damian.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to state that, let me put my camera on there, that if the baseline fundamentals of agriculture are the maximization of our solar energy, and through photosynthesis, the conversion of that solar energy into roots in the ground that is able to produce sugars and enrich the soil, then we can argue that a system, an agroecological system that intercepts the maximum amount of light, produces the maximum amount of roots, and utilizes the maximum amount of available soil moisture, will always have more productive capacity than a conventional system. So it is, but it's not to say that there's one solution for everything, but those baseline fundamentals should encourage all of us that there are ways to orchestrate and do it. And if we accept those things as true, then there is a way forward. We just have to work to find it. That's it.
Nina, if I may.
Yes, please.
So for me, with food and agriculture, if we look at it as an infinite game, meaning we want to keep feeding our people on this planet for generations to come versus a finite game, I'm trying to make a living today. One of my modules in the past, so this is not credited to me, they viewed regenerative agriculture as an upward going arrow. Conventional agriculture as a downward facing arrow, and then sustainable agriculture as a cyclical arrow. And that was all just to help visualize the idea that if we're feeding the soil, then we're enabling it to have more life than we could possibly extract from it. But it's an exponential arrow because in the beginning it takes a bit of time, but eventually our extraction of food will never be able to exceed what the life-giving force is in the soil. Versus with the cyclical arrow, which is about sustainability, we're adding inputs so that we can extract. So, and then with the degradative practices, we're taking out more than we put back. So eventually the soil is degraded. So that is why my presentation, I really tried to emphasize that we need to regenerate soils before we go into sustainability. And the lecturer at the time, I think it was Kiss the Ground, they were really emphasizing that, you know, it's not that sustainability isn't important. It's what's important is that we regenerate soils and then sustain it at that improved, healthier state. And then if we give it enough time, then our production and our yields will actually probably be the same or possibly surpass current practices, because again, it has more life than we could possibly extract. So that's why I'm such an advocate for soil health, and it is a long-going process. And as more science comes out, you know, about the exchange between microbes and plants at the root level, it then becomes more understandable, and then we can create our designs for the farms, the different soil types, the different climatic conditions. So we're all learning together. It's not right or wrong. It's just like sustainability, yes, it is important, but the regeneration would be possibly from our studies. If you regenerate first, it has a better advantage, a better return. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you, Anja. Thank you. So we are running a bit late, so we will start with the question and answer now. I will give a few conclusion words, but before, Allister, you wanted to have a screenshot done with some of the panelists. So if everyone could maybe open their cameras. And I will take a screenshot. So if everyone can smile. Wait, I will just take another one to make sure.
So
Okay.
our colleague Erle took off his camera, right? Right, all the time he had his camera on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So, well, as we come to the end of this session, I would like to take a few minutes to sincerely thank all of our speakers, the panelists, the moderators, the interpreters as well, and of course the participants. Thank you everyone for your valuable contribution and active engagement throughout the session. I think today's diversity in the presentations was quite impressive, and I'm certain we all learned a lot about agroecology. The discussion highlighted the important role that agroecology can play in supporting more resilient, productive, and sustainable agri-food systems in the Caribbean. Through the experiences shared by entrepreneurs and the insights provided by the experts, we have seen that agroecological approaches can offer practical solutions to some of the key challenges facing Caribbean SMEs, while also creating new opportunities for innovation and value creation. We have been also reminded that successful transitions require the right enabling environments, whether it be adaptation to local context, access to knowledge, strong partnerships. It is essential to support SMEs in adapting and scaling agroecological practices. So yeah, as we saw today, and as we know, the Caribbean faces significant challenges, but it also possesses tremendous strength, entrepreneurial talent, rich agricultural traditions, and a growing commitment to sustainability. So by working together and building on this strength, we can help create agri-food systems that are more resilient, competitive, and better prepared for the future. So we really hope this session has provided useful insights and new connections, and that it will inspire further action and collaboration across the region. In this spirit, I would like to invite you to join our Agri-Innovators, which is our online platform, where you will find the resources from this session. But there is also a community forum, which you can register to, and you can share ideas, innovations, etc. My colleague will put the link in the chat. Thank you, Eva. So again, thank you to everyone. Special thanks to my colleagues from COLEAD, but special thanks to IICA for this collaboration. We are very happy to have it. Thank you, Allister. Thank you, Roxanne. And And thank you everyone for your participation and your questions. And we will see you in September for the next session.